John D. Villarreal, and I'm going to be joined by Paula Villarreal. We are live on Rumble right now. We're also live on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, X, and hopefully LinkedIn too. We'll see. If not, we will repost to LinkedIn. Big story here, big story, a lot that happened here. I'm going to get right into it. First of all, a little bit of background. I'm actually a Berkeley Law alumni here. There's a big story about this protest at the Berkeley Law Dean's house, Dean Erwin Chemerinsky, and we're going to get into that. There's a lot of different aspects to this here. I think it's a complicated story. I will say I reserve the right to revise and amend my comments later. If I do make some mistakes, I do apologize about that or whatnot. This is definitely a complicated issue on a larger complicated issue here. But I also think it's something that's as a conservative that went to Berkeley, and Paul will definitely have his comments as well because he remembers my days there and things like that. Believe me, I am very used to, in my opinion. First of all, everything I'm saying here is all my personal opinion, only not because I say inspiration, not alleged facts, etc. As a conservative that went to Berkeley, undergrad and then law. I mean, I think I've seen my share of protests, personal and otherwise. You definitely should have seen my inbox. I did talk radio at KSFO. I filled in, one time there, and basically, I was doing talk radio at different places and TV. I did talk radio KHDK in Sacramento. I don't want to go on about it, but I was the vice president of Federalist Society, so I was a conservative at Berkeley, definitely a public conservative at Berkeley. I was out there, so you could just imagine, and it was a very liberal place then, and it looks like it's also a liberal place now. We'll get into some of that. We'll touch on that, but I want to get right to the story. And then I'll have my comments on it, and we'll get Paul's comments as well. So if we look at this here, I'm going to put this up here. Let's see how I do. Let's go right here. We've got this from the New York Post. Got this from the New York Post here. And it talks about, this is from Isabel Keene. And this is on yesterday at 2:12 p.m. We'll get back to this. This is Laura Powell, civil rights from Fox 2, the local station there, covered it. So she has her comments on that one. And basically what happened was you had a situation where Dean Chemerinsky, and first of all, I'll say this, Dean Chemerinsky, I don't think this is any surprise. I may be wrong, my personal opinion, right? Definitely, we don't agree politically, maybe a liberal, maybe very liberal, whatever, but has been a staunch supporter of free speech and stuff. So what had happened, and we'll get to his comments later. We've got some different comments here. Nor do I think I'm going to solve everything here either, but I'm just going to give a little bit of context in my opinion as a conservative, someone that again, I've seen a lot of protests at Berkeley, in my opinion. So Dean Chemerinsky, let me see if I can make this a little bit bigger here. Yeah, let's do that. So Dean Chemerinsky here and his wife, Professor Catherine Fisk, had a special event in their backyard. Because of pandemic and stuff like that, he does this every year apparently, or it's certainly a tradition. And because of the pandemic, I think they had several days that they did this. We'll get to his statement to clarify anything if I'm wrong about any of this. And in doing this, he would invite people that are graduating over there, super nice, right? Doesn't need to do this. I never got that, I'm not going to call out my dean or anything like that, but I think that's a very, very nice thing to do. I think that was very courteous, very kind of them to do that. And it's kind of a nice little send off and talking and it's a community. It's very, very cool. So this is and there's going to be, nor am I going to get into the whole, I'm not going to do a deep dive into the legal analysis here. And first of all, I'm in Florida, not licensed in Florida, not practicing in Florida, no term claim, all that type of stuff. I am licensed in California and all that. And I went to, anyway, I don't want to get into all that. I'm a talk show host right now. There's no legal, this is my opinion as a talk show host, but what I don't want to do is get into the super deep dive of all this and who's right and who's wrong, because I think there's larger issues here. And I think there's more of academic issues, more, et cetera. Anyway, I thought this was a very nice thing for them to do. And it's basically like the kids come, the students come over, it's different ages, I'm sure. The students come over and they're able to kind of have a nice event. It's a nice little send off. You're with the dean. That's pretty cool. You're at the dean's house. And there's times I've done events at, different level. You go to a professor's house, whatever like that. Like, you know, you should be on your best behavior. I just think that in general. And there was, I guess, some stuff leading up to this. Obviously, there's situations in the Middle East. It's very, you know, complicated, and definitely there's people that are passionate on all sides of this. Understandably, I totally understand that. You know, and I don't want to get super into this either, but I mean, I'll say that, you know, and I've said this and other stuff like that, and I don't have to repeat everything, but I, you know, pretty sure, to the best of my knowledge, we can trace some of my lineage to Sephardic Jews, and my wife is Israeli, and I have lots of family over there that are Israeli as well. And, you know, she's actually Aramaic, and it gets super complicated. A lot of people consider her Palestinian Christian. Although because she's Aramaic, like a lot of her family are actually Jewish in Tel Aviv. It's a whole thing. So I've been there. I'm no expert. Okay, I'll say that right now. I know enough to know that I don't know. Okay, I know enough to know that I don't know. I know enough to know that it's complicated, and I understand. And that, I mean, honestly, this is actually good, because this is actually the point. I have no hope of getting all my thoughts out here or solving anything, or think that I have like a super special knowledge or anything like that. Nor should any Berkeley student at an event that the dean has put on at his house with his wife, who's also a professor there. Like, you're there to enjoy the meal. If for whatever reason you feel, I'm jumping the story here a little bit, but with my commentary, but if for whatever reason you feel like you cannot go to that event and whatever, in good conscience, or have a good time, or whatever you feel like, don't go. Don't go. Okay. Why would you go to that then? And I'm not saying that, I mean, it seemed like they were being very hospitable. And so I've seen the video, and of course you can't get the whole context in the video, but let's get into it. So here we have, so the event was hosted by Dean Chemerinsky and his wife. Okay. And then at some point, and I don't know, it would have been great to have a little bit more context and know sort of what happened here, Paul. And I'm going to bring you in here in a second. Of, you know, this law student stood up, and she started talking about some stuff, and she had a microphone. I'm assuming that it was probably for the event and set up there. It had amplification. She was reading some stuff, but very quickly there was a discussion. You can see some pictures here from the New York Post, or that was actually put up by SF McGuire at X at SF McGuire 79. You can see some of the pictures here. This is the dean over here. This is the student over here. And then at some point there was some kind of back and forth. The dean's wife steps in, and there's some, you know, jockeying for the microphone, for lack of better. I'm not going to characterize that, but there's, you know, that you can see the picture here and the picture over here. And that's definitely an issue, in my opinion. That's definitely an issue. I mean, I probably would have handled it. Hindsight's 2020. Nobody's perfect. I'm not perfect in my life or anything like that. I'm not trying to sit here and arbitrate or judge anything, but I probably would have handled that in a different way. I think, you know, than Professor Fisk. Okay. But I wasn't there either. You know what I mean? So, I mean, I wasn't in that situation. Then you can see some more things here, and then there's the microphone, and they both have their hands, you know, both of them have their hands on the microphone. There's a discussion, and I'll let you, I don't want to play the video now. I'll let you see that video. The video is out there, but basically very quickly, Dean Chemerinsky's like, hey, please leave. Please leave. And now it's just private property. At that point, when you're asked to leave, you got to leave. And then there's back and forth, and there's like, oh, well, hey, you know, we've talked to, and then there's a group of people that seem to be with the students, and like, we've talked to lawyers, and we've been advised that this is, you know, a First Amendment rights, and then back and forth and all this type of stuff. So you get the picture. And to me, this is kind of sort of par for the course of being at Berkeley. So I'm not excusing anything, but I mean, I've seen this before. Paul, let me bring you in here on this. I know you've seen this here. What do you think about this? What are your general thoughts before I get into sort of my analysis? I want to get your perspective on this.
Okay. First, let me just say that I can back up everything you said. You were a clear conservative, going to, at that point in time, maybe the certainly one of the most liberal institutions in the country, in my opinion. We're talking like late 80s, early 90s, mid 90s. No question about it. And I don't think there's any doubt in my opinion about that. So I back up everything. I spend a lot of time on the Berkeley campus myself, so I know exactly what John's talking about. I saw it with my own two eyes. A couple of things. Number one, and we talked about this before. Look, I went to Cornell. Cornell, one of the famous things in Cornell history is the Willard State Hall takeover, which I believe happened in 1972.
And I apologize, Paul. I do apologize for this. I just have to say, I think I didn't click one thing. I think I just did it. I believe we're now live on LinkedIn, so you have to catch up. I'll catch up. I'll do a little super recap here after Paul's done. I didn't want to interrupt him, but I did want to say that. So I may repost one of the other videos for LinkedIn. So if you're joining LinkedIn late right now, then you've missed about maybe 5 minutes here. So, sorry, Paul. Continue. You're talking about Cornell. You're talking about protests at Cornell. Go ahead.
Yeah, so this event that was famous in the kind of mythology of Cornell is known as the Willard Straight Hall takeover. And it's like the student union. And again, this was, I believe, in the midst of kind of the movement, the civil rights movements and so forth in the 60s and 70s. And like I said, that's been even more kind of lionized over the years, certainly, I believe, in the last, decade or so. And one of the things, look, I engaged myself in protest when I was at Cornell, like for causes that I thought were just and so on and so forth. I think one of the things that I first believe when I look at this with Dean Chemerinsky is, look, now you're starting to get a sense, even people who may be liberal or on the left, that this can happen to you too. Like, you may believe that you're
correct,
a good guy or on the right side of things or whatever, but the people that are protesting might not look at you like that. And so we've seen this in the past, and we've seen this throughout history, where even those on the left kind of may turn on each other at times. I think that's what Dean Chemerinsky just found out. That's one of the things I think about this. Another thing I think about this is, once you realize that you can be looked at as not on the side of the good, then in my opinion, you need to stop indulging some of this behavior. That's what we've recently seen in this current wave of protest at Vanderbilt University, and I believe the other is Pomona University in California, where basically the heads of the colleges, the presidents, have kind of said, no, we're not going to do this. And if we do this, maybe you're going to get suspended. Maybe you're going to get expelled, and so on and so forth. Because if you do not confront this behavior, you're encouraging more of it, in my opinion. So those are the two things. And finally, I think I can't remember my final point, but it was just, look, I think that the overall with this is that we've seen this over and over and over again. And at some point, I think it can feel like it's a little too much or going a little bit too far. Something just happened, I believe, with the mayor of Bakersfield, California, where they were accosted by a protester in this same movement. And like now, I think that person that the protester's facing like 16 felonies or something like this. So I think there's a kind of a fine line with these protests, and I think people have to be careful about not crossing that line. And I thought that what happened to Dean Chemerinsky was like, I mean, it's ridiculous. This just my own personal opinion. I mean, this person's invited you into their home,
right?
And then you're going to turn this into like a film shoot. I mean, it's just like, for what purpose?
And, it seemed like there was in my opinion, it seemed like there was a group there, and they had already talked to some people. So was this planned and premeditated? Again, I'm not making allegations or whatnot like that, but we're talking about getting lawyers involved. I mean, I would just look at the statements and look at the actual video and stuff like that. Speaking of statements, Paul, we do have a statement from Dean Chemerinsky here, and I'm going to talk about a lot of things in my experience and stuff. I know you know a lot about that as well. And here's a statement. This is on Berkeley Law's website. This is a statement from Dean Chemerinsky, and we're seeing that right now. And it says here, and we're going to say, and it's a longer one, and this was very recently, and he talks about how this is profound sadness, and he invited, he had always invited first-year students to his home for dinner, which is really nice. Okay, that's super cool. And then apparently this year they were asked by, the third-year class to have a graduating students over because of, again, we talked about the different things of the pandemic and stuff. So again, I may have gotten some of the facts a little bit off there. So they were doing this basically for 3 nights at their own house. That was really, really awesome. And, he didn't foresee what was going to happen. Okay. And I'm not going to get into it. I'm sure there's a lot of other, I'm not going to get into some of the other background in this story. It's definitely some very reprehensible things in my opinion. I don't want to get in, I'm not going to even, I'm not going to characterize anything. I don't want to get into some of the other background. I just want to focus on this story. There's all kinds of stuff that happens at Berkeley, and a lot of other places. And important. And listen, Paul, I will stop right here right now and talk about this. We're seeing this now. We have seen this. Okay. And we're talking about some of these big time alumni and alums of Harvard and Penn and others. I mean, again, at the congressional hearing with Congresswoman Stefanik and with that line of questioning, we've seen a lot of different things on a lot of different campuses. I'm not sitting here casting aspersions or anything like that, but I mean, we've seen some incidents at Stanford Law and Berkeley and at Yale, and we've talked about things at Cornell and Harvard. I mean, there's a lot of different things going on right now, and there's a lot of concern out there with some of these protests that have just gone maybe a little bit too far. I mean, what are your comments on that, Paul?
Yeah, I think some of them have perhaps gone a little bit too far. And I was just thinking about it more. And for people who don't know, I want to say the main plaza for Berkeley or for the University of Berkeley, or one of the main plaza, is called Sproul Plaza.
Correct.
And that's where you will see a lot of the protest and kind of gatherings and people like making speeches and this type of thing, just like kind of out in the public, out in the open.
It's like a free speech zone. And there's literally there. I mean, I don't know what it is now, but when I went to school, there's almost literally some kind of talk, discussion, protest, something, fill in the blank every day, almost. Okay, it's very regular. Go ahead, Paul.
Very regular, and so. You and I, I appreciate that in the sense of it's almost like, there's the free speech element and people kind of making their feelings known. But it always seemed a bit, certainly kind of too, maybe sometimes the people there would go a little too far or be a little bit over the top and this type of a thing. And so the way I look at it now, and what we see these various protest movements across the country, not just the current one of the situation in the Middle East, but it feels like to me, and you and I have talked about this before, it's like the whole country is Sproul Plaza.
Right.
And before it wasn't like that. Before, Sproul Plaza was the only place, or one of the only places you got Sproul Plaza, and now that's everywhere. And so it does kind of feel like, it feels like a little bit too much, I think, some of the times. And that's what Dean Chemerinsky just found out.
And I'm going to have my comments on that. I'm going to have my comments on that very soon here. But I wanted to sort of continue with this. And the comment here, statement from Dean Chemerinsky right here. Quote, while guests were eating, a woman stood up with a microphone, stood on the top step of the yard, and began a speech, including about the plight of the Palestinians. My wife and I immediately approached her and asked her to stop and leave. Now it goes on here with some more details of what had happened and stuff. I think a key point here is, first of all, he talked about like how many people like RSVP'd and looks like about 60 people. And that, when the apparently so his statement here, quote, about 10 students were clearly with her and ultimately left as a group. So, I mean, think about that. Like, you've got 10 students that are going over to this event, for why? Like, I mean, was there a plan? Like what? I mean, if you're not comfortable there, if you have something to say, why would you do this in the backyard? I mean, what people are sick of is we're not talking about this. We're going away from this. We're talking about, I mean, hypothetically speaking, it's just like, I mean, this is totally different, but I mean, it's like some of these gym videos or on the street videos of, oh, hey, this person's doing this. And you're just, it's almost like, we see this in politics all the time. It's almost like, it's gone too far. Like there's legitimate, there's incidents that happen, things that happen. And sometimes a lot of things that happen, like, oh my gosh, we're glad we had a camera. That's probably why a lot of, police forces have body cameras now and stuff like that. But then there's this massive, insane proliferation now, of course, with the smartphones and everything like that, where everyone's got a camera in their pocket, kind of. And it just seems like, some of these incidents or some of these things that are put up on social media, it's like, well, it's just like, it makes you question, it makes you think, it makes you wonder a little bit, Paul. But it really comes back to the same thing, which is getting back to the story. So that was all hypothetical, had nothing to do with anything else here, right? Okay. Just talking theoretically. Getting back to this specific story, why would you go to the dean's house, okay, if you had a problem being there or you wanted to protest? So I'm not going to a dinner to try to protest. I would never go to a dinner to try to protest, Paul. Do you agree with that?
I do agree with it. I would not do that. I don't believe that's the forum to do that, especially if someone is bringing you into their private home in good faith.
That's what I was going to say. It's a private home. It's not at the law school. It's not a huge public event. It's invite only, RSVP, 60 people. They probably were providing, hosting, spending money for dinner, whatever like that. And you're at their home. Now, here's the other thing too, and I don't want to get too into this because I just don't. But if we look at what's going on over there, Dean Chemerinsky is, maybe on, well, I don't want to say this. You understand, listen, I have all kinds of different friends, and I have all kinds of different people that I know and stuff like that. I'll say this. When we were at my wedding in Israel, we had, Jewish people, the family there, Christian people, the family there, friends, best friends that are, of my wife, that, the Muslim there. We had all kinds of different people there. I would never think, and we would visit and do different things, go to different people's houses and stuff like that. And, I would never think, and when we went to Johns Hopkins, there's a lot of people, there's people there that were from Syria. There's people there from China, all over the world, of course, any top university. I would never think of going to someone's home. And if I knew, or I thought, or I wondered, like maybe I was on the different side of something, or there was a sensitive topic, or potentially sensitive topic, I would never disrespect them in their home like that. I try not to disrespect anyone ever, anywhere, right? I mean, I don't know if I succeed. I try, but it's if you want to have a one-on-one conversation. Now, you want to talk about an issue, but that's different than I'm taking the microphone and I'm basically going to, have a captive audience here to do whatever. And we've got cell phones rolling like I don't understand that mindset. I just think that that's very rude and that's very disrespectful. If you felt like your position is different than Dean Chemerinsky's position, or you're not comfortable there, or whatever, don't go. It's really simple. But you do not have a right to basically take over this dinner for that people at Berkeley Law. And here's the other thing, Paul. I was out there and I was vocal. I took my lumps and stuff like that, if you will. And we'll get into that here in a second, I'm sure. But I was a, quasi-public figure, if you will. Listen, Dean Chemerinsky is probably more famous than I am or anything like that. But that I was definitely more known than most of the law students there at that time, right? You know what I'm saying? Many of them have been more successful than me. So, I don't know. But it is what it is. And God bless them, right? And that's fantastic. And so, but that actually gets to the point, which is to say, a lot of students, it's funny because actually Berkeley undergrad, at least when I was there, and maybe it's more so now, actually has a lot more conservatives than you think. They're just quiet about it. They just don't want to talk about it. And then you get to the professions. I know a lot of people like, oh yeah, Charlie, yeah, I agree with you, but I can't say anything or whatever. Or they just, all they want to do is graduate and get that job at Big Law and make that money. And I totally get it. And so that kind of gets to your point, which is this extremely vocal minority out there in all these colleges, if you will. And unfortunately, now it's a much bigger minority, and some places maybe a majority. But the activists are able to sort of control the message, if you will, and kind of hijack these schools, and it's gone on too far. Now, I'm all for free speech. Lord knows Professor Chemerinsky, Dean Chemerinsky, excuse me, has been a super advocate of free speech for so long, and has even talked about, Trump and the gag order and stuff like that. We'll get to that in a second. But this is just too much. And particularly at Berkeley, you've had a situation where these people they've barricaded Dean's offices. They've done the sit-ins and the protests, and it's just nonstop. But it has been certainly, in my opinion, tolerated on, if not encouraged on the left, not so on the right. In fact, we have speakers that are sitting federal district judges or appellate judges that get shouted down at Stanford, speakers shouted down at Yale Law. And you think this kid didn't receive some heat? Oh my goodness, dude. Super heat. This story's not about me. I won't make it about me, but I certainly have context. And being the vice president of Federal Society and on the air at KSFO, which is a station of Michael Savage, the conservative station in San Francisco, and being able and having, I had a paper there that was called the Bold Standard at that time, and then we had Mayor Willie Brown and Congress now Dean Tom Campbell, Bill Bennett. Maybe I think former Attorney General Ed Meese, I think, gotta double check. I don't know. I can't remember, but I'm pretty sure I've met him in person. Anyway, you get the idea. So I'm like definitely the most public conservative dude. I think that's very clear. I think you can back me up, Paul. That was in Berkeley at that time for any of the grades that that was from 1L to 3L. Would you agree with that, Paul?
That you were, I'm sorry, say that again.
I was the most known / famous conservative at Berkeley Law at the time I was there. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think that's true. You're doing radio. People knew who you were for sure.
Right. I was doing radio. I had been to, Republican national conventions. I knew stuff with the party. I was again, I had the Bold Standard, my own paper out there. There's just no question about that. And you could ask some of my peers and stuff like that. So you could imagine what my inbox was like. Cause you had it out there in the hall there. You would have the public the mailbox and stuff like that. Oh my gosh, stuffed with all kinds of stuff. I would get hate mail, death threats, people in my face, all kinds of stuff. And listen, if you're any talk show host, particularly conservative, we've seen it. It's par for the course. We understand that. But it's different than someone coming to your house. And really, and the more I think about this a little bit, and listen, I understand both sides here. And I don't think this was a great look for either side here. And here's what I mean by I understand both sides here. War's bad for everybody. I'm not gonna get into everything here. I'm not gonna be able to solve everything here. We understand that. War's bad for everybody. And there's gonna be significant feelings on both sides, okay, of this. I don't know what Dean Chemerinsky's side is or anything like that. I mean, we've heard what the protester said, so that's all I can go off of, okay? But to go to someone's house and then do that, it takes it to a different level and stuff like that. And there's a lot of the feelings on both sides are probably very visceral. I try to apprise myself of the news that's going on out there. And even, Donald Trump, President Trump has talked about, the PR aspect here and how, a certain country might be losing the PR war on this, stuff like that. I have said, Tucker Carlson has said, Joe Rogan has said, a lot of people have talked about this. I'll refer you to my other stuff. We can't get into everything here. But basically, I will say that the position, I went 6 weeks on this war and the tragedy and the horrific events of October 7th. I went 6 weeks on the air on News Talk 1040. And we've continued to talk about it. And Paul has talked about it too. And Paul has talked about it on X, and he has his own comments and all that. And my position, super high level, is war's very bad. And it's just super complicated in terms of all of this. And this, some of these issues have gone on thousands of years and stuff like that. That doesn't mean that you just can't, but at the same time, and what's more critically, but a lot of, I thought about this the other day. It's very, and this is, there's someone else interviewed. I think this is from The Hill. I can't remember who to cite this from. But basically, like now, like and again, I don't want to get too deep into this, but it's hard because it's hard for the short story is it's hard for Israel to find an exit strategy here or a win, if you will, and it's hard. I will say it's hard for any country to win, in this insurgency type of thing. We didn't win in Vietnam. Nobody's won in Afghanistan, Napoleon, Russia. I mean, you can look on and on. Ukraine. These are very, very difficult situation. There's a humanitarian aspect to this. There's, a potential. It is a tragedy what's going on over there. It is an absolute tragedy what's going on over there. We love everyone. We're for peace, love, freedom, opportunity for everyone. I've already told you who I married. I mean, come on, So at the same time, you have a very nefarious, how do I want to say this, Paul? There's a lot of students, Jewish students and Israelis and stuff that are very, there's been a history of persecution for a long, long time. And there's a lot of people that are very sensitive to that. I don't want to get too into this, but I mean, it's like, this is where, again, I'm not speaking for anyone else, Trump, Tucker, whatever like that. But I mean, Trump had a good statement. I'm for peace. We got to love everyone. We got to get along, and that really kind of gets back to the whole thing with the Berkeley thing and everything like that. And I want to get Paul's comments because I've gone on for a little bit here, which is to say, like, and I'm going to bring something else up here. Let me see if there's anything else in this comment. But, my focus on the law school, and one of the contributions I try to make is when I was working as a research assistant for Professor Rob Merges, one of the top patent people in the world. And I've always been entrepreneurial. Obviously, I had the marketing and PR, that kind of stuff. And my push was, okay, I know Berkeley's like the liberal law school and free speech and everything like that. And I got in almost everywhere I applied to. Right. I mean, I'm top law. I could have gone to a top 3 law school, maybe even number 1 law school. Right. I mean, and I got, scholarships and fellowships everywhere I went, I got into. Okay. But I chose to go to Berkeley for a lot of different reasons. I chose to go to Berkeley because I went there as an undergrad. I took a law school class as an undergrad. Professor Cruder let me in there. I got an A in that. I was training professional athletes there. I was from the Bay Area. I liked that. It really like staying in the Bay Area and want to go to Silicon Valley. It was really, really, Stanford or Berkeley. And ultimately I went for Berkeley. And sometimes like, I try to second guess that, or coulda, shoulda, woulda. Everybody thinks that. But I love Berkeley, go Bears and stuff like that. And I got the best job I could possibly ever get at Wilson Sonsini Rosati with Mario Rosati, the great Mario Rosati. And I took securities from Larry Sonsini, the great Larry Sonsini, And so one of the things I try to push there in writing this business plan and stuff like that is, and this is one of the things I want to, to my Berkeley law alumni out there, and the great professors there, and great people like, who put up with me, like Professor John Yu, who everybody put up with me, right? And so I appreciate all of you. And I think it's a mutual, but this is the thing. Berkeley let me in. And I was very clear on my application, stuff like that, you could tell that I was a Republican. I talked about going to a Republican National Convention, and they let me in. Berkeley let me in. And even though there was there were some interesting kerfuffles, and we can get into that another time. We coexisted, and I got some heat, and I thought that there was maybe some cancel culture and some different things, and a lot of it. But I'll save that story maybe for later or another day. But at the end of the day, we both made it. We all made it through, or at least I made it. And all I'm trying to express is, I definitely contributed a lot to that university and that law school, and that law school contributed to me. And we learned together. And that's the insidiousness of cancel culture. I'm not going to talk to you. I'm not going to let you speak. I'm going to shut you down. Oh, you think differently than me? Well, forget about it. How many stories and news stories, Paul, I'm going to bring you in right here, and then we'll get to some more, in the last 5-10 years, have been corrected or flat out wrong? Go ahead, Paul.
A lot. As you said, you can't, look, you say this all the time when we're doing the radio. 50% solution isn't 100% solution.
Bingo.
You're cutting people out.
Go ahead.
If you cut people out of the equation, you're lessening your pool. You're lessening your information. I think you said it earlier. You are having a tighter information bubble. You talked about this. We talked about the NPR story. You're getting an insular bubble. And those are things that is not a good way to exist, because you're losing out on information. We hear so much about diversity and everything. Well, you also need viewpoint diversity.
Bingo.
And so cancel culture negates that. It makes that impossible to have. It becomes, as you said earlier, an echo chamber. That's not what you want for anybody, no matter how much you believe in your cause. You never want to exist in that state. We're talking, of course, this all relates to the Middle East. I've told you before, after 9/11 happened, I went and told myself, you know what? I need to learn a lot more about what's going on in the Middle East in general, the background. And I did that. And I'm glad that I did that, because I didn't have enough information about what was happening. And if of course, that was a tragedy and a disaster and very wrong, but I was forced to look into things that I didn't know. And people should expand their horizons and expand their bubble beyond who they might agree with. And that's, if you have cancel culture, if you exclude people, you're never going to get that. And that's just, as we said, whether it's in business or anything else, you will end up with an inferior talent class if you do that.
That's a perfect statement, perfect segue, a very important statement, rather, a perfect segue to what I want to talk about here in a second and how to wind this down. But I do want to do Dean Chemerinsky justice here in terms of making sure that we get this statement out here. This is the final paragraph here. Quote, "I've spent my career staunchly defending freedom of speech," and he really has, in my opinion. We'll get to that. I have spent my years as dean trying hard to create a warm, inclusive community. I'm deeply saddened by these events and take solace that it's just a small number of our students who would behave in such a clearly inappropriate manner. And okay. And so I think that, I can understand where, look, we're very closely allied with Israel, and they're, we have deep ties over there, and absolutely, and we're supporters of Israel, and Paul and myself and everything like that. At the same time, I can understand. Yeah, again, we love everybody, okay, and some of these pictures and reports are just heartbreaking, right? At the same time, I mean, again, I'm not going to get into everything here. We can't solve this here, and that's not, and that's why I said it's a super complicated issue. War is bad. Ukraine is a tragedy. There's so many different places going on. Rwanda. I mean, there's so many things so I can understand where, if you feel like you're not being heard, or not enough, or you can't get the voice, or whatever it is that you want to get, you feel passionate about that on whichever side you're on, or whatever. But, and again, on this issue, there's a lot of that. Why do you think they're streaming from Rumble? People go on Locals, people go on X, and thank goodness from Elon Musk, because there's a lot of people who feel like they can't talk about these things, or they're going to be canceled. We've seen so many people deplatformed and canceled and stuff like that. That's why it's very important to have these conversations. But where it's not appropriate to have a conversation is at a private dinner with other law students there. I mean, be respectful of your host, be respectful of the other students, particularly if you think or may guess that your host or other people may be on may have a different perspective here. It's just rude. It's just not the right form. And to take a microphone, and I don't know how the dynamics of it, I don't think that's good. Now, I want to very quickly say, and then we'll wind this down here. I do want to give props to Dean Chemerinsky here, because he's talked about he's talked about before. And again, I highly doubt Dean Chemerinsky's voted for President Trump. I don't know, but I highly doubt that. But Dean Chemerinsky has talked about, the gag order with President Trump, and how, he basically defended Trump's right to free speech. So this is someone that's been a champion of free speech out there. And this is from Bloomberg Law, and this was by Tanya Jacoby from Emory University School of Law, and this was back in November of 2023, okay? And just talks about how Dean Chemerinsky has talked about that, and we go here. There we go. Aaron Chemerinsky, Dean of UC Berkeley School of Law, argued that as abhorrent as Trump's speech is, again, not a Trump fan, it can't be restrained for the purpose of protecting public officials. So this is the whole gag order stuff, okay? In the Judge Chutkan case, okay? And so this is someone who has very much stood up for free speech. Paul, your comments?
Yes,
go ahead.
And it's good. Like you said, look, we've seen this with a couple different figures. I think the people that come to my mind are Dershowitz and Jonathan Turley.
Absolutely.
Both of them are liberal.
All of them are liberal.
And both of them both of them are liberal. All three of these people are liberal. They're all professors of law, but they have kind of drawn the line with going so far with this that it's kind of, you can apparently throw the law out the window to kind of go after a political opponent. And I respect them a lot for that. And it's good that Dean Chemerinsky is part of that kind of movement. So I definitely respect him for that.
So let's wind this down on this. And this is kind of what the point of it is, right? When I was there, you could see sort of, and it had been going on for a while, obviously at Berkeley, because Berkeley is known for that type of stuff. But I was kind of the canary in the coal mine, if you will, in terms of look, I don't bother. And, I just do my own thing and stuff. And it's like, if you can't handle someone like me, okay, who's, I'm conservative, almost libertarian, but I love everybody. I talk to everyone, like we're cool with everybody. Right. And we'd like to think we're very reasonable and everything like that and all that. And how are you going to handle anything? And it's only gotten, unfortunately, progressively worse, even though I smashed it, in my opinion, in the law and was very successful in terms of getting into the best firm and doing.
Can I say something?
Go ahead.
I just want to say this, just because of what you just said. Look, people know you and know your style. Sometimes you talk a fair amount and everything like that, or it takes you a while to get to a point, possibly.
True.
But I know from being around you, not just being your brother and doing radio with you and everything. I know from being with you at events that you did at Berkeley, you make real arguments and you're willing to listen to the other side. So in other words, I totally agree with what you said, which is if you can't deal with you, you're not going to be able to deal with anybody that's conservative, because like I said, is you will make good, solid, well-constructed arguments. And that's the way that debate should be held. So I just want to tell you that, say that to the audience, because you're very good at that. You don't just kind of come from like whatever, just kind of hodgepodge a debate along. You'll make real arguments with real facts and real points and real logic. And so if you can't deal with somebody like that, you're not going to be able to deal with anybody.
Well, yeah. So that's a great, okay. So I appreciate that very much. And let me say that. So it's like, that's exactly right. It's, and this is where I wanted to go with this. And I'm glad we're ending on this note. I'm legitimately a super genius. Okay. And I only say that for this, it's not, it's here to pat myself on the back, but we have to make this point. The only reason, well, I don't want to say it that way. I've felt, my opinion, I've felt that there's many points in my life that the only reason people dealt with me is because the horsepower is so insane. The talent level is so insane, and maybe in the car business, stuff like that. The results are so insane, you got to deal with them. You got to deal with me. And maybe that's maybe like T.O. or Michael Jordan or The Rock or whoever. Different people in different, depends on where it is, have felt that way. Sometimes you're the establishment, sometimes you're the outsider. I don't know that I've ever been the establishment. Trump was Mr. Establishment. Trump, the apprentice, until he ran. And then it changed. But the point of this, it's the same guy. You know what I'm saying? We trap ourselves in these weird little paradigms and these strange ways of thinking sometimes, right? These narratives. And people get worked up. And that's the thing, is it's like, dude, you get, we all do. Listen, you can't be everywhere. You can't be, but it's like people get themselves so worked up about different things and then the story changes. And someone else just had this story, and I'm going to come right back to this because this is this critical point that Paul brought up. And that's what I always wanted to go here with this. So this is where I want to end on anyway. But I can't remember who it was, the NPR story that I did last night. And it's Yuri Berlinger, a lifelong liberal, an avowed liberal, who said basically, like, we had all this stuff about Russia collusion that turned out to be a hoax, as per the Mueller report. But then we didn't have that energy. We didn't have that action to basically go after and expose and discuss that it was a hoax. After it just kind of went, just quietly went away. And it's just like, let me get my little guy here. Where's my little guy here? Hold on a second. Hold on. Let me get this right here. Where am I at here? Where am I at here?
Well, John, it's not that important, and it's Trump. And Trump is so bad that it was still a good cause. And
No, that doesn't work. We can't do that. We can't do that. That's the problem. That's the problem. And what I was trying to say to Berkeley many, many years ago, and I hate to be, this is the problem that I run into. People are like, oh, it's so great. It's so great to be a super genius, or it's so great to be 7 foot tall or 8 foot tall or bench 500. There's a lot of other things that go along with that. That's not always so great. I'm routinely 6 months, a year, 2 years, 5 years, sometimes 10, 20 years ahead of the curve. And I told those dudes there at Berkeley and stuff like that. And some of them listen, believe me, they took that plan. They've been doing some good things, and God bless them and stuff like that. And that, because that's what I want to do. That was, I try to contribute. I love Berkeley, right? And it's like, stop talking about all this silly stuff and crazy stuff and stuff like that. The leaves in your backyard, the law review this and you know, all this left-wing stuff. That's fine. We got enough of that. You'll always have that. You'll always have that. You've got Silicon Valley right over there. Stanford's eating your lunch. Other people, you can be right now. Berkeley has so many Nobel laureates, all these different things. We need to do stuff. The plan was very simple. Well, it was complicated, but simple. It was basically this. It was basically, look, we need to do things that are, it's all about deal flow. I've always known that. My great boss, before I even got there, I knew this, but he also said, you know, it's all about deal flow, John. I'm like, I know. And it's like, you need to do things that are relevant, that are about now, provide interns to these the law firms, but also the companies. You get the hot companies, the HPs, the Facebooks, the Googles, this and that, whatever. Boom. Now you on hot topics. So now you've got the companies. Who wants to come? Professional services, the law firms, those kind of people, they want to come. Great. Then you get you cover hot topics, important issues, cybersecurity, AI, whatever it would be now, right? Now who wants to come? Oh, the policy. Excuse me. The media wants to come. Now who wants to come now that the media is there? The policymakers want to come. And now you're really important. And now people will write checks and do different things like that. And I had this all figured out. I had it all planned up, and boom, boom, boom. I was making the calls. I was doing it. I've always done this stuff. I've always known what it takes. That's what we need to do. That's how you be relevant, because people are going, whatever they do there, the protests, this and that, whatever. Let me tell you something. In my opinion, the majority of people going to a top 5, top 10 law school like Berkeley, T14, whatever you want to do, they want to be successful and they want money. That's most of them. That's most of them, player. That's why they're taking out 50. Are you kidding me? 100, 200, $300,000 of loans plus. They got to pay that stuff back. There's some people that they want to, they want to do whatever public interest or different, or they just want to learn. That's fine. The majority of them, if you took surveys, particularly anonymous surveys, they want the do-re-mi, and there's nothing wrong with that. So why not be a school that's relevant and business focused, especially when you have Haas there that's also a powerhouse. Now, when I was there, the law school was much stronger than the business school, and the business schools come up a lot. Why? Because they've been relevant, and they brought in Silicon Valley, and they're doing these things that I talked about and stuff like that. And now they're right there, in that same league as the law school. But like Berkeley, it's like Stanford, like Hopkins, and Harvard, these great schools. All these schools do really well. So it gets to this point, and I'll wind down on this. Even though I was a superstar, in my opinion, and just, I'll leave it at that. I was going to use some other words too, but I'll leave it at that. A superstar, in my opinion, in terms of a massive rainmaker, and just, I thought I was a great lawyer. I was so effective and successful in Silicon Valley, and I had the business chops, stuff like that. And I had opened up crazy amounts of business. I'm talking like in my personal opinion, I mean, like within what I did within like a year and a half, 2 years, like let's call it, somewhere in that zone. Let's call it roughly a year and a half. I think I ended up generating, like, over the years, certainly 7, if not 8 figures. I think it's like 8 figures. I think the best of my knowledge, it's like 8 figures of business. That's insane. That is insane. Okay, brought in like 35, 36 clients to the firm as a first year associate. Nobody's ever done that to the best of my knowledge before or since at that firm. Now, I don't know everything. There's tons that I don't know. I mean, so I'm not alleging anything. But that is insane. Okay. And I'm the kind of person, if I have a little bit of a platform, if I have a little bit of something to put together, I can do amazing things. And you know how hard it was for me to get another job in law? How easy is it? How easy is it to apply to law school now as a conservative, or just a moderate Republican, or just a moderate Democrat? Look at the applications. I know this because I just applied to business school and different things like that. And Hopkins is pretty cool. But if you like, but then I got this crazy idea of like, I'm going to redo my MBA and go to an M7 because I went to Hopkins because my wife was the one. Anyway, whatever. But in going through that somewhat recently, it's insane. Some of these questions are basically, it almost feels like, who did you vote for, or who are you going to vote for, or did you do this, or did you do that, and all the public. And it's almost like it feels like ideological screening. And I would submit to you, much like the NPR story, it's so hard to find conservatives or moderates or independents or whatever in law. It's shifted super far left. And much like this story, it's gone way off the deep end. Even the super liberals are fighting with the super liberals. It's craziness. We're not talking about 50% solutions, not 100% solution. We're talking about a 0.1% solutions, definitely not 100% solution. And how much talent is on the table? Why do you think people are coming to Florida, where I'm at right now? They're fleeing. New York, California. California's net lost people. It's gone crazy. You can't have a profession where one side, or even the majority of people, because I think this also independents, can't work or not allowed or have to start their own. It's nuts. And we're seeing it at the corporate level. We're seeing it in the law firms for sure. That's always been, it's always been that way in the law firms. I mean, look at the ABA, look at all that stuff. We're seeing it at the schools now. It's not right. You can't have this cultural Marxism, ideological conformity. And guess what? When I was in, I hate to say it, but I was in Berkeley Law, we were exposed to critical race theory. This is early on. I've seen this so long ago, dude. We all had to restudy, in my opinion, those in that class had to restudy for the bar, had to learn it almost from scratch. Got out the Barbary, had to teach it. And that's fine. You got people who are super smart there at Berkeley and stuff. So we figured it out. I smashed the bar, but I mean, you can't have a profession. You cannot have elite schools. Harvard just deal. Oh, all of a sudden, ACTs and SATs are back. Oh, surprise, surprise. Elite schools need to be elite, or they're not elite. And that doesn't work for the students, and that doesn't work for the alumni, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you just can't have these top universities, these top companies, entire professions, or big swaths of professions that do not allow independents, non-political people, moderates of either side, certainly Republicans or conservatives in. You can't do that. It's not going to work. It's not sustainable. And you can't use the power of the purse and the money. And we're going to, if you don't toe the line, you're not getting a job. If you don't toe the line, you're going to get canceled. If you don't toe the line, you're not going to get funded, and all the rest of it. That's the problem. And that's what this speaks to. Because this is the end result. It's not the end result. It can go even farther than this, which we don't want to see. But this is the point. When you get this kind of story, and I was the canary in the coal mine decades earlier, and I told you about this, Paul. We told them about this, and now here we are. When you can't even deal with the John Villarreal and they're like, listen, not everybody likes me, but I've been on national TV. I've been doing major market talk radio because people like me. They like what I say. I'm popular. I've trained professional athletes. I've dated a lot of women. I better be careful. My wife's got the best wife. The whole thing, like, dude, I'm a likable guy. Like, if you can, and I'm a logical, reasonable guy, and my stuff works and makes sense and makes money. If you can't even deal with John Villarreal, how are you going to deal with life? Because let me tell you something, life is not as I don't care if you're at Perkins Coie or you're at some super NPR or you're some like not everybody's going to be like you. particularly if you're doing international deals and global deals, more and more global, like you've got to be able to deal with people you disagree with. And it's the same story, whether it's Disney, Bud Light, all the rest of them. A 50% solution is not a 100% solution. My recommendation is to these law schools, business schools, medical schools, all these types of stuff, take these applications, rip them up and redo them. You got to start. You want diversity? Fantastic. I'm all for it. But like Paul said, we need diversity of viewpoint. That is the biggest area where you guys are hurting right there. You got to stop that. You got to start talking to people, working with other people, listening to other people, because we have reached peak woke, and it's going the other way rapidly. And people, whether it's Disney, Bud Light, others are losing massive money because people are just like, enough of this. We're tired of these. Why do I want to hire a law firm that hates me? Why do I want to drink a beer that their marketing people don't like me? Why do I want to go take my kids to a theme park or something like that? It's enough of it, dude. Doesn't mean you can't believe whatever. We need to have a conversation. That's why people like Elon Musk, Joe Rogan, whatever, let's have a debate, but let the arguments win. Let the best ideas win. You can't just shout down people. You can't just cancel people. You can't just not listen to people or deplatform or take away their money or not let them work if you don't like what they're saying. If you're right, what do you have to say? I saw this good thing, and I won't put it up. I won't talk about it here, but my wife showed it to me, and it was really intelligent. It was basically like someone saying, like, why do you have to convince me of whatever you're saying? Like if you have to convince me and ask me these questions, it means that you don't believe it yourself. Like you don't have to ask me a question if I breathe air. We all know that I breathe air. You know what I mean? It was something like that. It was and went on that logical train of thought. So anyway, you understand what I'm talking about. Paul, any final comments that you have?
Yeah, look, I think you said a lot of great things there. I think there's a lot of good points. We discussed a lot of important topics in this. And coming back to the original story, the way that you handle this as an administration of the college is you handle it the way that Vanderbilt and Pomona handled it, which is you got to put a lid on it at the beginning. That's the way you stop this from furthering and kind of continuing and going down the line that nobody wants to go down.
Well, and here's the thing too. If students feel passionate about this, if a section of your students feel passionate about this, I mean, in Berkeley is the heart of free speech and Berkeley law. I mean, it definitely, we've had a Supreme Court judge. I mean, definitely, a legend in that whole thing. Fantastic. Put on a forum. Put on a seminar, put on a talk, a debate, whatever you want to do, have it at the school, but you don't get to just bust in and take over a private dinner for students graduating or first years at the dean's house. That's crazy land. It's the golden rule. Do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. If you treat people right, if you don't want to be canceled, don't cancel someone else. And this is what Elon's, out there, fighting for in the marketplace. I've been forever, Paul. You've been forever, Joe Rogan. I mean, again, I'll submit it again. I can't prove it. Who knows? I mean, a lot of people think that, oh, John, you wasted it. You're a loser. Who knows? Maybe I am. But I really believe that I'd have a very good chance of being super successful and retired by now if I was a sellout. I refuse to be a sellout because these issues are important. And there's something bigger than money or, I mean, whatever you believe in religious wise or this life or whatever, it's like, dude, you have to stand for the right things. And people going to elite law schools and Berkeley law and stuff like Berkeley law, then you should believe in that. But there's also a right way to, but one of the things about the right thing, one of the most fundamental things about is treating people with dignity and respect and kindness and compassion. And being polite and stuff like that. And that's it. So I think that there was a misstep here. I think that, I'd like to believe that had they to do it again, that maybe both sides would do a little bit differently. But I do think that we need, there's a way to accommodate the speech, but also, that law school needs to focus on being a great law school and turn out lawyers that are going to do great business and do great things out there or whatever they want to do, public interest and stuff like that. I mean, that's all fine too. But you have to have a diversity of viewpoint, and then you can have different forums where you can do different things. Berkeley could host a great forum on these things. So anyway, I want to say that Shout out to Berkeley Law. Shout out to Dean Chemerinsky, and everyone there. And I think that, you know, I hate to have been right about this, Paul, but we were right about this a long time ago. And unfortunately, I think now that maybe some people, and we've seen this, right? We've seen a lot of people, whatever you want to call it, red pilled, whatever. I don't know what the right term is, but we've seen a lot of people waking up over the last, you know, Bill Ackman, a lot of people waking up over the last year or two. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree. And it's unfortunate that it's taken them this long, but at least they did. And so that's good.
There you go. All right. That's what we want to say about this. I welcome your comments, and we'll do more things here. And it's great to be on Rumble and streaming and things like that. So there you go. So for Paul, I'm John. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.